Hello, social workers, mental health professionals, and change agents. What is going on? Welcome to another episode of season 7 of the Social Work Rants podcast. I'm your host, Bass Moreno. Saludos a todos. Greetings, everybody. Thank you for tuning in, tapping in wherever you are watching or listening to this podcast. I appreciate all the love and support. Gracias a todos por su apoyo. Keep rocking and rolling with the podcast on all social media platforms on the YouTube, hit that red subscribe button on the YouTube, or whatever videos, hit the like button on the videos, comment on the videos, rate, share podcast episodes if you're more of an audio listener. Wherever you listen to podcasts, hit rate the podcast, download episodes, um, tell a friend, tell a friend. So thank you for everybody for rocking. Um, Follow the podcast on all again on Instagram at the Social Work Brands Podcast. That's all one word. Follow the podcast on Twitter, X, whatever Elon calls it nowadays, at Social Work Rants, and then of course hit that like button on Meta, aka Facebook. Uh, Type in the Social Work Rants Podcast. Hit that like button, and I already said about the YouTube. Hit that red subscribe button. The subscribers are coming along nicely. So again, thank you for again rocking with the podcast. Um, so yeah, we're gonna before I introduce my guest, I'm gonna do the disclaimer, and also before I do the disclaimer, want to shout out everybody that had purchased my poetry book. I know I haven't brought it up on the podcast much recently, but my poetry book, Trying Through Pain: How to Maximize Your Full Potential in Hard Times, it is available on Amazon. I'll try to remember to put the link in the show notes so you can get an autographed copy. Ship them out directly from me if you're not down with purchasing on Amazon. Um, so yeah, we rocking and rolling. My disclaimer: this podcast is for education and entertainment purposes only. It is not a substitute for mental health therapy or any sort of mental health treatment. If you're in need of assistance in America, there's different ways. 988, call 911. If you already have a therapist, contact your therapist. If you have a psychiatrist, contact your psychiatrist, ACT team, um, any means of help, or go to your nearest emergency room. For all my viewers and listeners out of the United States, wherever your emergency contact information is, contact that phone number, or just go to the hospital, get yourself checked out. It's okay not to be okay, but we here for you. And again, the podcast is not a substitute for your therapy. If you got a therapy appointment, go to your therapy appointment. And get the help that you need. So my guest at this time, Eric Morris. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing well, Bass. Thank you for having me, man.
No, no, of course. I'm glad we could connect with the back and forth on the emails. That
Yeah.
I'm not the most organized person in the world, and like I said, I'm a one person show, so we still making it happen. So I'm glad you were able to connect and talk about your work in private practice and the struggles that come along with that, and especially dealing with insurance, and of course a big pet peeve of these grad schools not providing business fundamentals. That I've talked about it ad nauseum on the podcast. And we'll continue to talk about it as long as the social work grad schools continue not providing that sort of education for MSW students that they're trying to get into clinical work, that they gear most students into the clinical work. So it goes hand in hand, and I always think about um, my fellow peers, people that I've met who do private practice, and I think of them, and they would be making a killing. As we have a huge mental health crisis. We've been in a mental health crisis for even before COVID, and COVID kind of went to another level, and people would be making some good money when providing services, whether it be through insurance or self pay, or even offering like sliding scales, just providing the need there, and it just drives me nuts.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. It's very frustrating.
So before we get into it with you, just let the viewers and listeners know who you are, what you do, and besides your private practice in
Yeah.
social work.
Yeah. So like you said, my name's Eric Morris. I'm a licensed clinical social worker down here in San Antonio, Texas. And I've been I've been in a lot of spaces. I think I sent you. I spent 26 years in the Army before doing this, so this is like my second career.
Thank you for
And
your service, by the way.
yeah, yeah, you're welcome, man. And since my retirement and getting into social work, I've worked for the government, I've worked for nonprofit, I've worked for a local mental health authority, in a lot of different ways. A lot of it around homelessness. I was on an ACT team doing
Mm,
complex care and all those kind of things. And then my clinical supervisor asked me to come on a contract and do some private practice therapy for her. And then since then, I launched my own practice. And so that's kind of where I'm at now. Um, you know, most of the folks I see veterans, obviously, because there's a pretty good connection, and like that work is like it's not easy, but
mm,
having that shared lived experience makes it uh, more conducive and compatible to the folks that are coming, right? Which also translates into first responders and those folks, because the communities and the cultures there's a lot of similarities there. So I do a lot of work around trauma, anxiety, depression, because those kind of float together. I enjoy the serious mental illnesses, like the schizophrenia spectrum, wherever somebody may be,
mm.
bipolar. I've been getting some ADHD folks, and then I really enjoy working with the LGBTQIA plus community as well, and helping them through this system in this world that does a lot of harm, it,
Yes,
as we know.
yes,
So
and you,
that's
and you're
that's kind
working
of where I'm at.
and
Yeah.
you're working in a state that does harm to pretty much almost every
Yeah.
sort of population
Yeah.
in the states. So
Yeah. Yeah.
how is that, like, when we talk about like the, bring up, kind of bring the code of ethics, and like
Yeah.
everything that's been happening with uh the governor, Governor Abbott in Texas. I tried very, very hard not to go to Texas, but there
Yeah.
was too good of an opportunity to pass. So I went in March. Like literally spent a weekend in Dallas. Went in, went
Mm.
out, and and that was it. And I'm glad I did it. But between Texas and Florida, if I can help it, like I'm not trying
Yeah.
to give my money to to those states in any way. What So going back to kind of like code of ethics, you're a social worker. We got a governor who seems like if not every day, at least like every week, every month is doing something in terms of harm for not only his people, but obviously immigration has played a huge part with Texas, and he put those things in the water to for people not to go in the water and try to
Yeah.
swim over to into Texas. I was like, this guy is just I still don't understand how he won the last election, beating Berto, but how does that, you working as a social worker and you got to deal with like the governor and his policies and just overall just being a social worker in Texas.
Yeah. Well, one, it's not easy, right? Because our ethics get challenged a lot by like the laws that are put in place.
Mm,
Um, you know, across the country, and like you said, more specifically with Texas and Florida and the things that are happening in these two states. Um, so the great thing about being in private practice is I don't have to do what other people tell me, right? So if I worked for an organization and they wanted to do things a certain way in order to follow whatever he was doing, right, then I would be subject to that, right? Whereas private practice, I can be more aligned with the social work values and ethics and say, hey, like, I'm here for the client and I'm here for the person. And, you know, one of the things I think with social work that is different a lot of times between us and some of the other disciplines in mental health is, you know, our charge of social justice in working and advocating to make change for the better of people. And part of that is to do things that are right that may also be against the law,
mhm.
right? Not to say that I'm going out there and breaking the law.
Right.
But you know, if I have a client that is, you know, thinking about transitioning or, you know, talking about that or wanting to explore those things about transitioning, like, I'm not going to do anything to put them in harm's way,
Mhm.
right? In whatever the way that is. Like, I know um, last year they made, I think he put a law that said that it was like if anybody had knowledge of a a minor that was um, seeking medical services for transition or whatever, like they were going to consider it abuse. And
Mm.
so um, that was kind of really put onto CPS to say, hey, like, you know, if somebody reports that, you know, a child is trying to transition, then it gets reported in abuse and you have to go investigate and all that stuff. And so there was people that were struggling with that. And but being in private practice, I'm not like, that's a law I'm not going to follow, if you will,
Right.
right? I'm not going to tell the governor or the government about one of my clients that's, you know, transitioning, thinking about it, talking about it, doing whatever, and say, hey, like, I have to report this, right? I know that there may be repercussions for me, and the state of Texas may come after me as a social worker because I broke their law.
Mm.
Um, but I see it more as an ethical and moral right of
No, of
what's
course.
best for the person. So that, I think that's part of the challenge of, you know, the ethical dilemmas that we walk every single day doing this work.
Mm. You hit a nerve right there. The ethical dilemmas. I like that.
Yeah, man. it, uh, you know,
But
when you go through,
that's true though. I mean, there's a lot of, ethical, dilemmas and just it's been going on for so long, and it's like I don't get it. I don't
yeah,
get it.
yeah. It so it reminds me of something. So I do some organizing work um, with a group. Um, the large umbrella is showing up for racial justice. I'm not sure if you're aware of them or not,
No,
but
I never heard of them.
yeah. So it's a it's a collection of white people that are working to um, change things with social and racial justice, right? So an affinity group of white people come together to work in collaboration with other groups to change things for the better of everyone. So, to find liberation. So there's another group that I'm working with that's part like connected to them. And um, a lot of the times when we have discussions about stuff like that, we know the system is rigged, right? And like a lot of people will say it's broken, and I challenge folks, it's not broken because it's working the way it's been designed. All the stuff that's been done to make it the way it is exactly what was intended, right? So there's nothing wrong with it because it's not broken, because it's the way it was built to, and it's operating the way it was built to operate. What we need is a different system, right? And so a lot of times when we think about advocating and getting into these things and working for change, right? A lot of times it's, oh, I'm coming to do this thing for these people, right? I'm going to help out this group, right? When in reality, I'm also in need of liberation myself. And part of that is to say, my work for liberation is for me, and the byproduct is it's going to help everyone else get liberated as well, right? In order for me to become liberated, we also have to liberate everyone. Like if no one is like if not everyone is liberated, there's nobody's liberated, right? um so going back to that, um that uh I just lost my train of thought, so yeah. um
So is that basically like, so you said a organization, mainly white folks,
yeah,
they're trying to help, try to liberate through liberation,
yeah.
but starting with the group first, or they're focusing on like the marginalized communities first, and then like how does that work?
Yeah. Well, so the group I'm working with, we're focused on poor and working class white men,
Okay.
um, because they often get used by politicians,
Oh yeah,
right?
absolutely. And then they don't realize it either. They're going to be in
Yeah,
you.
yeah. Whether they're like, whether it's, um, you know, something like January 6th to incite people to come to DC and try to overthrow an election, or just on a campaign trail saying, hey, we're going to take care of the coal miners in Appalachia, or, the people in the hollers of Kentucky and Tennessee, right? A lot of those folks have no idea what anybody's saying about them. And frankly, they don't have the time nor the energy to really care, because they're trying to put food on the table for tomorrow,
Mhm.
right? Because they're scraping by, because the system says, like, we, in order for, the guy that owns X, or formerly known as Twitter, to be who he is, exploitation of that person that, is in Appalachia, it's going to happen, right? In order for somebody to have $1 billion or more, somebody else has to be exploited, right? Um, so working to help that group that, in addition to everyone else, it has been marginalized and underserved, right? Because one thing I've found along the way is the other communities, like Black communities and Latino communities and Indigenous communities, they have the people and they know what they need and they know how to take care of each other. And that's what they're doing. They don't necessarily need me to come and save them, right? We've been doing, like, a lot of that has been taking place over the years to say, hey, I'm going to come in and save you. And I always come back to this, that something that Malcolm X said, and is completely paraphrasing, essentially saying, if well-meaning white people want to do something, is go collect your people and help other white people realize and remove the veil of invisibility of what's taking place in the world and do something about that, and to help bring all of us along. But
Do you feel like it has been helping, or more people like kind of like, oh, people from that group are like open to that idea, or you feel like it's been like they've been like kind of like maybe brainwashed from what's been happening? Like no, like a lot of people, like I mentioned, a lot, not all of them, but a lot,
yeah,
kind of had this stereotype of just being like poor, not educated, and
mm-hmm.
most of the poor people are white people, and then like
Yeah,
these like rural towns and rural areas, and
the
they're
small town.
not getting like the supports that they need, and it kind of like people like assume, okay, you're white, you'll be all right, and they're like
Uh-huh.
struggling like everybody else.
Yeah.
um have you seen from your work they kind of opening their eyes and kind of see like, okay, maybe there is something to it, or or they're in between? Like, what are you seeing?
Yeah, there's definitely, the hard part for this work is it's never going to happen on social media, right? Going on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and all those places, you're never going to be able to affect a great amount of change because people sit behind keyboards, and like there's so much distance and so much communication that's removed from people having a relationship and communicating, right? So it takes work of people going to those places, going to Appalachia, going to the holler, going into these small towns and having conversations and sitting down and saying, hey, like, what's going on in your life? And what can we do to help make this better? And do you know why that this is happening to you? Right? Like the truth of why it's really happening, not because somebody's trying to swim across the Rio Grande, right? But because somebody is trying to, drag race in outer space, essentially, right? People are, trying to build these rocket ships
Mm-hmm.
and be the first guy to Mars. And meanwhile, there's people that are starving and losing their life because they don't have the basic necessities. And it's not the guy coming across the border.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's going in person and sitting down, having conversations, hearing stories, and all of those things is where it happens. Kind of like the work that we do, right? The magic of our work and the therapy and sitting in a room with somebody going through the some of the most difficult stuff they've had in their life is it's the relationship
Mm-hmm.
and holding space for another human being, right? And truly hearing and seeing them for who they are and working to make their life just a little bit better, right? Because we can't solve everyone's problem overnight, but we can make maybe today or tomorrow just a little bit better than it was yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same thing with organizing. It's going to people and having conversations, sit down, talking with them and saying, what can we do? Like, let's build a community together with everyone to get what we need. And that works.
No, I like the concept to it, because
Yeah.
it definitely communities definitely need to come together. Like
Yeah.
we all went through pandemic together. There's a whole
Yeah.
like kind of collective PTSD that that surrounds it, and like
Yeah.
as of April this year, the government is like they wipe their hands clean. All right,
COVID's over.
yeah, the COVID emergency is like is over, and it's like okay, well, what does that mean? So
Yeah.
it's like, and then I've had episodes. Okay, what does that mean? Is the people got to reapply or renew their Medicaid because they're about to be cut off? So it's like that's one of the main things.
Yeah.
Um, on and on top of other stuff that the government doesn't, for some reason, doesn't talk about it. So,
Yeah.
um, how, does that like affect kind of like what you do in terms of like the private practice? Have you seen like anything regarding that?
Um, yeah, the it's it's really difficult for us to separate the different parts of ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
right? To say like, um, I'm only a veteran this time in this place, or I'm only a man here and there. I'm only a social worker or a therapist over here, right? I'm all things all the time at the same time. Um, so being a social worker, an organizer, a therapist, a business owner, somebody in private practice, I'm all of those things all at the same time. So I there are times like I'm that person in every space. And depending on who the client is and what's taking place in their life, right, those conversations may take place, right? Um, and I don't bring that in there to say, hey, like this is like that's my like I have an agenda,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I don't, right? Especially with the clients that I'm seeing for therapy, right? They have real significant problems, whatever they are, in their lives that they need help with in that moment. If it happens to connect with some of those other things, as we know with social work, in a person in an environment is a very important thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I also talk about that, right? Like the environment that somebody is in, the the system that we live in, the workplace that we go to has an effect on us, has an effect on our physical health, has an effect on our mental health. If you go to work and you have a boss and they're, abusive or toxic, that's going to have an effect on your mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I'm going to talk about those things too, because they also have an impact and an effect on why that person's sitting in my office in front of me.
Right.
Um, and doing it in a way that's obviously person centered
Mm-hmm.
to their experience and what they're going through, and bringing those things together. Yeah.
I'm touch on something. How was that transition from you serving to being a social worker? Like how was that process like?
um, I there are some active duty service members I have, and even some of the first responders that I see, like some of them are close to like transitioning out of that into back to civilian life or whatever, right? And my own experience in working with other people that have been through the same thing, talking to my friends and others, people that I know that have been through it. Um, the transition from service, even with everything that's like, if everything was the best, right? Everything's lined up, it's all going like well. I tell them it's going to be a shit show, because there's things that are going to happen and you're going to go through things that you didn't even prepare for or know that were going to happen, because there's unknown unknowns and you can't get ready for those. They're just going to happen. Part of that we talk about is the loss that occurs, whether it's somebody that's ready to go, wants to leave, and is prepared and is doing all the things to transition from service into whatever they do next, they're losing something. They're losing their part of an identity, a part of sense of who they are, right? Because one of the things I think that's uniquely different about the military and government service, even people that are first responders, whether it's a police officer, a firefighter, an EMT, whomever, right? It requires that person to put all of themselves into that, right? And the organizations even operate in a way that they consider you to be completely theirs. Like that comes first, and then the rest of your life. So leaving that and transitioning to a way of life that's different it can be difficult, and the loss of those things are hard. One of the first jobs I had when I retired was doing education counseling for the Army as a contractor. And I've had several folks that they had spent over almost 30 years or more in the service, and they were ready to go. They're like, hey, like, this is a great thing. I'm going to go be with my family. I'm not going to work. I'm going to retire. I'm going to get some VA disability, whatever. And then they break down crying because you take off the uniform. And one of the things that's often difficult is you could be the greatest, best person. Everybody knows who you are, and you do great, wonderful things. Then you retire, you take off the uniform, and the rest of this society and the world, especially like the VA system, they don't care. Like, okay, you're another veteran in our system that is overwhelmed, and like, get in line, if you will, right? And really the only folks that get like VIP treatment, if you will, are some of those folks that retire at the very top levels, like a chief of one of the services or joint chiefs, the people that you see on news from the Pentagon all the time, or somebody that won the Medal of Honor, right? You have to be like a household name in America to get treated in a way that some folks expect us to be treated. The rest of us, you're just another number and another name in the system to get care. And you could have done great, awesome, wonderful things. And as awesome, and that's great. But part of that is the realization that you are a human being, just like everyone else.
Right.
And like, you're not going to, a lot of us are not going to get treated the way that we thought, or sometimes even told. Right? Part of the difficulty with that transition is in some ways how, especially in our society, in America, in our country, they put veterans and service members up on this pedestal of like a hero and all of those things. And I understand that on some level. And at the same time, a lot of us don't necessarily want to be put up that high. Like, I'm just another person. And that was a job that I did for a long time. And it was very different, and it was very specific. And I do believe that veterans should get the things that they're supposed to get, like healthcare. And if you have a disability, get a disability, and all of those things, because you basically say, hey, I'm willing to put my life on the line for this idea. And so that those people should be taken care of, and also not be idolized into this version of a person that is unattainable. that does not exist. Right. And I think that is the difficulty and part of the problem, um, when veterans transition, because you get told this so much and so often, and so much of the messaging of all of these things of, hey, you're great, you're awesome, you're a hero, you got this high pedestal you're on, and then you get out and you're treated just like everyone else. It's like, wait, there's a difference between what is being said and what is taking place.
It's almost kind of how we started the beginning, how like
Yeah.
grad schools
Mm-hmm.
like gears to like private practice, but without teaching the
The things you
skills
need.
for business for your business. And
Yep.
it's like the army, he's like teaching you're gonna be great, you're gonna put on this pedestal, and it's like you
Yeah.
constantly see you know, servicemen or former servicemen who end up being homeless and like
Mm-hmm.
needing assistance and begging for money and just care even with the VA is not great or what an expectation where you should be with all the money that goes into
Mm-hmm.
the department or military and all that stuff. So it's they always
Yeah.
pump all this money. Is like, okay, so how about you helping the former servicemen, and like you said,
Yeah.
like you serve basically risking your life and literally losing limbs and all this stuff and limping and all this stuff, and it's like the least you could do is provide good, adequate care for your servicemen,
Yeah. But,
men and women, and
yeah. But I use the VA system, and I don't have to because I'm retired, so I can use the TRICARE that I have from being retired. But I use the VA system. Um, I started using it because I had clients that were veterans, and I heard a lot of the horror stories. So I was like, well, I can I can use the VA system. Let me go check this out for myself and see what it's like and experience it. And there are it is difficult, and like in San Antonio, there's one VA system. So all the veterans in this area, whatever the catchment that they fall in that belongs to the South Texas Veterans Administration, have one funnel that they go through, and everybody has to go through that, right? So there are difficulties associated with that. And also, I do get what I need for my health, right? I don't have copays. I don't have to pay for medication. I don't have to pay for doctor's visits. Does it take sometimes a while to get scheduled for something? And does it take some advocacy on my part to the providers or the system to say, hey, look, I need this, and I need to have this checked out and taken care of. Yeah, that does take place. And I also know for those folks like yourself that aren't part of the VA system and don't get that kind of care, it happens out on the outside system as well.
yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Like the difference is, instead of a funnel, it's more like a strainer, right? There's a lot of different ways. There's a bunch of different hospitals, clinics, doctors' offices, all kinds of places you can go to get the care you need, right? You don't have to be forced into one. You can pick and choose where you want to go. Obviously, depending on the insurance and financial situations and all the other stuff that goes into it.
Right.
But the experiences happen the same as well. So there are things I think the VA needs to do better, and there are things they're working on to make better. And it's also not completely horrible, like has been sensationalized. And obviously, it depends on from place to place. There are some VA medical centers that are much better than others, and some that are worse than most. So,
But like
yeah.
I said, that could be said about anything else, any other hospital system,
Yeah,
anywhere in the country. So
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
goes hand in hand. I've had a couple social workers on the past episodes of the podcast that work for the VA, and I've been told things they're starting to get their act together a little bit. But I've had clients, years ago, a couple clients who were trying to navigate the VA system, and just the buildings alone where they got to go to. It's like it's not state of the art buildings. It's like kind of like run down, almost could be like
yeah,
condemned. And I'm sure some of those buildings have been like condemned and like converted into like luxury condos now, stuff like
yeah,
that. So
yeah,
um this
yeah,
was going by like 2003, 2004, like working with a couple of veterans on my case. So
yeah,
it's compared to like now, like I say, it's still got a long way to go, but it's
yeah.
definitely there's been some improvements.
Yeah, there definitely has, and there are some really great people in the VA. An example is last month, Texas had their um, statewide yearly suicide symposium, and it was just outside of San Antonio. So I went to it, and the executive director for suicide prevention for the VA was there, and he spoke, and I asked him some questions and talked to him, and the dude is like insanely intelligent and hugely committed to suicide prevention, and like in a way that when you hear him talk and you ask him questions and have a conversation, you're like, the guy gets it and he's doing what he can in any way possible to make it better for everyone. And like that is inspiring to hear that somebody that high up is like that passionate and committed to that kind of work and saying like I'm going to do what I can to truly make a difference for this.
Right.
So like there's folks like that there, and you know that's important.
No, it is because it is like ground level work, and it takes a
Yeah,
lot of advocacy, and obviously everything comes down to money. How if you gotta like raise it somehow, or like funding from the government, state, local. So
yeah,
it's a lot. And I know from when I hear like when like the federal government passes like their budgets and stuff, and I see all this money going into Department of Defense, and it's like get some of that money from the VA so they can fix these buildings and veterans can get all this character. Like you're right, like put us such high pedestal, and like Veterans Day and Memorial Day are big important days, and rightfully
yeah,
so. Like I've had a couple family members, like my mom's cousins, like served in Korea, and then I got had like high school classmates that served for a little bit. So um, I had a high school friend that did like two tours of Iraq and a tour of Afghanistan. It was like he was ready to go back. I'm like, like here, it might like being like you just the outsider, just to be like, are you nuts? Like you telling me you got hit with a roadside bomb and like you ready to go back for like another tour? It's like,
yeah, man. I used to be like that. I have clients that are like that, and it's a difficult thing to get past and through to the point of like I don't need to have my life in danger on a constant basis and being shot at to feel like my world makes sense. That like saying that sounds pretty
that's
insane,
powerful right there. Yeah, it's
right?
insane and powerful, and it's like,
Yeah. And a lot of the veterans I work with that say those things, you know, what we identify often, what's missing is the intimate connection between people that's needed, and it's not in. And a lot of times when we say intimate connections, people think about a, you know, like
Romantic. Yeah.
a romantic, intimate partner type of relationship. And it's not, right? Other men have to have intimate relationships with other men. That's a big piece that's missing in this country, that you can tell another man, hey, dude, I love you. Or like, you look like, dude, your clothes are like, you look really good today. Right. And spend time and have intimate conversations and cry and laugh and do all of the things, experience all of the emotions that we have as human beings, and, have hugs and spend time together in a true human way, right? That's what part of that experience is when you're over in Afghanistan, Iraq, or other parts of the world that we have been in, and your life is in danger, right? That that part of that takes place, but it takes a place in a way that's very toxic.
Mm-hmm.
And not to use the word trauma bonding, because that's more about like an abuser and abused relationship type of thing. But the experience of going through those things bonds people in a way that's hard to replicate.
Yeah.
Because we have been so disconnected from each other and ourselves. And so it's reconnecting people with themselves, with other people, with a community that cares for them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because oftentimes we talk, like, especially social workers, we talk about self-care, like, do self-care. What are you doing for self-care? Like, it's great. We all need self-care. And at the same time, we know how to take care of ourselves. I know what I need, and I know how to take care of myself. Right? What I don't have and what I do need is a community that cares for me, that comes and says, hey, Eric, what do we like? Let's take care of you. Right? Part of that is being able to say, what are the is your work-life balance helpful? If it's not, how can we make your work less impactful? How can we make your employment not so burdensome that you can enjoy your life and pay your bills at the same time?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And like, going back to the beginning of our discussion of being in private practice, one of the only reasons that I'm able to is because I did retire from the Army, and I have a rating for disability from the VA. So I have income outside of the work I do. It's like, do I want to be paid what I'm worth as a social worker and a therapist? 100%, because we are all underpaid in the mental health field.
Yes.
Absolutely. This is not even a discussion, really.
Mm-hmm.
And the retirement and the disability that I get is because of the other career that I had,
Mm-hmm.
and which enables me to do my private practice and not have to depend on that solely to pay my bills.
Right.
Like, I tell people it's like a universal basic income for me. So like, I believe in that thing 100%. Universal basic income, Medicare for all. That's what I have.
Mm.
And it, like, is it the best thing in the world? No, but it works. I get my basic needs met by those things. And I believe that everyone else should have a way to get their basic needs met without having to destroy themselves almost in order to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Real quick, I want to touch on private practice in
Yeah.
terms of dealing with the insurance and getting reimbursed, regarding your work.
Yeah.
How's that like for you in San Antonio? And
Man, it's difficult because you don't know all the things. Like, I never knew I needed to have a CAQH and get an NPI, right? And as a business owner, if I want to, have my company, be credentialed with insurance, I have to get a type 2 MPI. And then, I have to go to each insurance company to get credentialed with them. And they're all their processes are different, right? And they take however long. It's not transparent. And when you get done, like when you get credentialed, it's like, hey, congratulations, you're credentialed. You just start taking people from their insurance. And their pay systems are all different. And how to file claims and what they're looking for and all the rules that they have. There's not a good way to figure out what they are, right? An example, I think that I'm one of the ones that I'm struggling with right now is TRICARE, right? I got credentialed with TRICARE because I'm going to take veterans and service members or their families, and a lot of them have TRICARE, and I have spent probably a good month trying to figure out exactly what I need to do in order to file a claim the right way and have all the systems set up so that I can get paid for the work that I do with service member or a veteran. And there's like the information they have is so generic and broad in general that it's unhelpful.
So how you expect to get your money? Like, it's going to take you a month just to do one claim. And for example, if you see somebody, like even like every 2 weeks, if you're not seeing a person weekly, then like not only you got to do like the notes for the sessions, but then like following all those claims, you're constantly going to be behind and not seeing that money for that particular client or family.
Yeah. One of the things I did when I started this was I took Fridays off. And saying I took Fridays off means I don't see clients or patients on Fridays, right? So Monday through Thursday is when I see people. Fridays is when I do everything else that I need to do if I need it, right? I try to get what I need done during the weekdays, right? If somebody no shows or they cancel last minute or like I don't have somebody scheduled and there's a gap, right? I try to get notes done, file claims, do all the things I need to do during those times. But if I don't, I know that I have Friday to do a bulk of that. And it gives me a 3-day weekend every week that I'm not sitting in front of somebody having to do the emotional labor that we need to do, which takes a toll.
Absolutely.
Right? And there's been times when I thought to myself, maybe I could start seeing people on Friday. And then within 5 minutes, I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. Yeah.
You practice self-care doing
that. Absolutely, man. I realized one of the things that works for me for self-care is a 3-day weekend. And I'm like, I've gotten to the point where I'm not budging. That's my boundary. And I'm like, I'm not going away from it.
No, that's good. And
yeah,
that's something a lot of us are striving for, is like setting those boundaries. What is that? What are your absolute like no's? And I know, like for myself, like I've had jobs that I had to work on a Saturday, and I had like Mondays off. I was like, no, I'm not ever trying to work on a weekend ever again in a social work job. Unless it's for me and my own business, then that's different. But a nonprofit or anything like that, in terms of social service agencies, like, no, that's absolute no. Especially during the fall, I'm not missing my college football, my college basketball to do social work.
Hey, that's self-care, man. You got to do what you need to, like, be present when you need to be present.
No, absolutely. Where can people find you?
So I am in a lot of places. Obviously, Psychology Today is a pretty popular place there. I do have a website, which needs a lot of work because I'm doing it all by myself, so it's not the greatest place.
You and me both. For your pain.
yeah. But I think one of the places I just got onto was WebMD.
Mm.
So which I didn't know until just recently that we could be on WebMD, and I was like, oh, really? So yeah, I think probably the best place to and easiest that folks know to find somebody is either Psychology Today or WebMD. And you know, um,
I didn't know therapists could be on WebMD either. That's interesting.
yeah, it is. Yeah, and they have a free version and a paid version. I'm doing the paid version right now just to see how it works, to see what the throughput is. Because when I initially sat down with one of their folks, they were kind of telling me some of the analytics, and they just did a quick little search, nothing in depth, and we're like, because they have two sites that they operate, WebMD and shoot, I already forgot the other one. There's two sites
Mm-hmm.
that they operate, right? And I get listed on both of those,
Okay.
right? So on both WebMD and that other site, in just a month in the San Antonio area, there was 16,000 people looking for mental health services.
Mm.
But that's a lot.
No,
How
it
many
is a
of
lot.
those? Yeah, 16,000 is a lot, right? We have a population of I think we're a little over 2 million here in this area. Um, and so 16,000 is a lot. And, who knows how many of those actually like went through and are connected to services and getting the help they need, right? So that was one of the reasons I chose to say, hey, let me pay for this for a while and see what the analytics look like and the throughput that I get from it. Because 16,000 is a lot of people.
No, it is.
let me let me catch some of those.
That's like a whole NBA or arena full of people to be seeking therapy sessions. So
Yeah,
it's like I said, we have a huge mental health crisis in this country. Is only going to get worse, and
yeah,
politicians like Governor Abbott is like
yeah,
make things even more worse or
yeah,
worse to get those services that the people need, and the people
yeah,
need it to wake up and kind of see that. So people are waking up slowly, and just certain segments of the population need to
yeah,
really wake up and kind of see that these politicians are hurting down as
yeah,
much as everybody else.
yeah. But I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, all of those things. The My business name is Unbound Minds. So if you look on Facebook, Twitter, or not, I'm not on Twitter with that. So Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, yeah, those are the social medias right now
Okay.
that I use. So Unbound Minds, and then you can look for me on Psychology Today or WebMD. Eric Morris in San Antonio, Texas, licensed clinical social worker. Um, if you see my face and you watch the video, you'll know what to look for. But yeah, that's where I'm at.
Awesome. Keep up the great work, and thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely, Bass. It was great talking to you, man.
Likewise.